What's up, everyone? Sandicator here, and today we're going to talk about Vegenks. Obviously, I've been talking about it a lot because it is kind of insane. Um, Turla's ban really hasn't done that much to hit the deck. I think it's hit Black Aggro as sort of like a whole because it's given Demigra and Boo a fairly decent hit, but Vegenks seems relatively unfazed by it, and I was running it in my original build, but as soon as the ban list dropped, I was able to replace it with a sufficient card that we'll be able to go over later on in the deck profile. So first of all, we're going to go over the leader. We've got Vegeta Xeno and Trunks Xeno. Activate main, burst 5, draw a card. And this can be done on the first turn, which is hugely important because the deck can really go off if you go first and you open the right card. So yeah, that's very important that it's an activate main. And then his awaken skill is different. If you're at 4 or less life, or if you have 20 cards in your drop area, you can draw a card, untap an energy, and then flip them over. With this build, you're most likely going to be awakening at 4 or less life. Some games, depending on how you've drawn, you'll have to play it out so that you can keep your life total high, and you're going for that 20 cards in drop, but most of the times it's just going to be 4 life. And then the backside, which is kind of nuts. I think everyone, when they first saw it, was like, wow, okay. Yeah, so it's got Sparking 20. If you would lose the game by running out of cards in your deck, shuffle your deck into your drop area. This isn't going to happen very often. It's an aggro deck, so you'll most likely you'll be trying to finish the game before you deck out, but sometimes you can use this, shuffle your drop area into your deck in your advantage if the game has been dragged out. And then activate main, you draw a card, place the top 5 cards of your deck in your drop area, and you choose one of your Unison cards, and it gets double strike. So it has built-in double strike on the Unison, which is huge for the aggression. And then with all the other cards in the deck, the amount of mill you get with this leader is hugely important to the game plan. So he's a pretty insane leader as far as things are concerned. And his card pool, in my opinion, is much better than what Boo's was. So I'm going to talk about the quote-unquote dredge cards. These, for when I say dredge, I talk to a lot of Magic players about card games. So like my card terminology normally comes from Magic, and the dredge effect is similar to what these cards do. So all of these cards, when they're milled off the top of your deck, they get to play from your drop area. So we have Time Agent Vegeta. He has unique, so you can only have one on the battlefield. His permanent is very important for the Black Aggro strategy. If he would be removed from the battle area, he's sent to the warp instead, so he can't be VR can't be played off of him. And then he has an activate battle once per turn for 2 energy. Choose up to one of your opponent's battle cards with an energy cost of 3 or less and send it to its warp. This is very important because in the Green Goku matchup, if you go first, it allows you to warp their blocker so that they can't awaken off the first attack. It also allows you to warp Dark Power Black Mass Saiyan, which is like the hardest check to this deck. So that effect is very, very useful for allowing the deck to do what it wants. Next is Time Agent Trunks. Unique, blocker, and then when he's played, you can choose one card in your life and add it to your hand. So this card's kind of nuts because it doesn't have Vegeta's permanent. So Nigrishi can be played off of it. It self-awakens, which is hugely important, and it's a blocker, so it gives Vegenks a defensive tool that Boo didn't, and this card alone helps with the Gohan matchup very much. So instead of just right away warping Trunks with your Nigrishi to use Nigrishi aggressively, you can use Trunks defensively to chump block, and then in your defensive combo step, you can activate Battle in Nigrishi to play Nigrishi and fizzle the battle. Then the next card is Supreme Kai of Time, Guardian of Space Time. This card's pretty nuts. It doesn't have unique, so you're incentivized to mill it. The more you mill, the more advantage you get, and it's kind of insane. If you have 5 or less cards in hand when you combo this card, it gets plus 5,000 combo power, so it's a 10k. So free 10Ks for combo is very, very good for the aggression. And then our Unison card, Gotenks Fusion of Friendship. When he gets milled, you get to play him out of the drop area with 1 marker. Uptick 2, you get to choose 1 card in your hand and discard it, and this card gets plus 10,000 power. So you get to get your U3 cards in your drop, you get to filter out your hand of like clunky cards like the Double Strike Kai if you have more than 1 or you don't need it, or a second one of himself. So he's very useful, and being as the leader gives him double strike, it's just kind of nuts. And then you get the -4. This doesn't happen very often. For the most part, people will avoid you getting to this -4 because with the synergy with the leader, when you -4, it gets plus 20,000 power and dual attack for the turn. So it's a 25,000 double strike dual attack. Now, this doesn't always happen. Like I said, people are going to make sure that this doesn't happen. And then in order to do it quickly, you need to mill it off on turn 1, and you need to be able to uptick twice. So the earliest it can happen is turn 3. But it's one of those things where your opponent is just most likely not going to let it happen. On to the cards that transferred over from Boo. The Universe 3 cards and SS3 Tag Team Son Gohan. Now, I think all of the cards in this slide are essentially, to me, what the problem cards are with Black Aggro. Like, Turles was very powerful, but what these cards do is kind of insane. Like, they just play themselves from the drop area, so it doesn't take, it's not any risk of hand advantage. In the case of the Trunks blocker, you can warp it, bring the Degeneracy, and then you can mill another 5, and then you get another Trunks blocker. With VR and Gohan, you can just get so much aggression out of those 2 cards, because you can get rid of Trunks with Degeneracy, you can play Gohan, and then if VR is in your drop, you can play VR off of Gohan, and then you have another Gohan in hand, you get to play yet another Gohan. So it just allows for a lot of attacks for very low energy, for no energy. And then these cards can all threaten Awakened leaders for like no combo. So it is a lot of pressure, and personally the U3 cards, in my opinion, I think there's something that needs to be done about them. And then if I was to do anything to Gohan, I would just try and word it in a way that it still can work as the defensive tool, which I think is what it was made for, but just try and take away it being a big part of the aggressive strat. On to the cards that Boo didn't have access to, that sort of push the deck into a whole nother level. Trunks Elite Descendant, Vegeta Reluctant Reinforcement, and Black Mass Saiyan Splintering Mind. So Trunks Elite Descendant, you can overwhelm him in for like 3 overwhelm, 1 energy, and then you choose a Vegeta Xeno with an energy cost of 3 from your deck and you play it. So Reluctant Reinforcement is the only target in the deck. And then when Reluctant Reinforcement comes in, he mills the top 5 cards of your deck. So with Vegeta and your leader, you'll be milling 10 cards in a turn. So it adds to a huge amount of consistency on the Universe 3 cards, it adds to a huge amount of consistency on what I call the Dredge cards. And then with Vegeta, he has an Activate Main for 1 energy, place this card in your drop area, choose 1 Black Battle card with 19,000 power from your drop area and play it. So my target is Black Mass Saiyan Splintering Mind. There are some other targets you can play, one being Black Mass Saiyan Devastator. Personally, I don't like that because it requires you to have like 17 Saiyans in your drop area or whatever, and I want to ideally be overwhelming Trunks on turn 1, and then if possible overwhelm it on turn 2, and that 17 card requirement seems quite high to me considering how many Saiyans I actually have in the deck, and it being reliant on my opponent having Saiyan cards in their drop area. And you can also play Commander Red. Personally, I don't think Commander Red and Narirama are as good as Black Mass Saiyan Splintering Mind. So, Splintering Mind. When you play this card, choose 1 card in your opponent's battle area and send it to his warp. So it's got board removal, which is very important. If you're going for a game, it can remove a 5k, or if you know you can't win that turn, you can remove the most threatening card on your opponent's board. And then auto, sparking 7. When this card attacks, if your leader card is black, you may choose 2 cards in your life, send it to your warp. If you do, you warp one of your opponent's life. So this allows the deck to have burn damage, which is huge, and it's self-awakening. So if you get yourself to 6, and then you play this card, swing with it, you're down to 4, and you're off to the races because you get to awaken, mill more cards. Depending on your draws and mills, it is possible to get 2 of these on board turn 2, which is huge. You're pretty much going to be winning that turn if this is what's happened. It helps very much with the Jiren matchup, because you be very aggressive on the first turn. You can attack with Jiren. If they don't have Nimbus, you get them down to either 4 or 3 life that turn, and then you're using Mass and Splintering Mind to burn through their life activation. So this is very, very strong against Jiren. And then on to the tech choices. Firstly, I'll go over Hidden Power E Supreme Kai. This is just my double striker of choice. This card, if I see it, I know I've pretty much won the game, because I have so many attacks with my battle cards. I have the burn with Splintering Mind. I have the double strike with my Unison. If I just tack this onto my leader or onto a battle card, it's just huge. This is pretty much one of your main win conditions of the deck. Next is Great Ape Son Goku Saiyan Instincts. This is tough, right? Like, I understand that people don't want this card to be in the deck, and that's for good reason. This card is extremely expensive. It shouldn't be the price it is, and I understand if you don't want to buy it. But for what it does and the other cards you can run, this is the best card in the deck. If you're not having as aggressive of a start as you want, or if your opponent has been able to slow you down, instead of using your energy aggressively, you can just use Saiyan Instincts to draw 2 more cards and get your hand size very large. In games where I've been stalled out, I've got my hand up to anywhere from 11 to 15 cards just because of this, and I've been able to hold off, and then once I've wasted their defensive resources, I've just been able to go off on them with a 15 card hand. So that's very, very important. Boo is fine. The issue with Boo is that it draws 2 cards and discards a card at the end of turn. With this deck, you want to be seeing cards instantly. That's very important. And then with the drop, then the other one is Drop Area Fu. That is my next choice for the deck, because the Drop Area Fu mission accomplished. He can grab back your super combo. He can grab back your Gohan, so that you can continue Viara Gohan shenanigans. Yeah, so that's like my card of choice. Fu might be 1 more energy than Boo, but it gets you a card right away, and it gets you a card that you want right away. So that's very huge. Next up is Crisis Crusher Son Goku. This is like a weird thing you're going to see in the deck. This is the newest addition to the deck. I was originally running Hachiyak Hatred Everlasting, but I've found a need for Crisis Crusher Son Goku because Dark Power Black Mass Saiyan completely shuts down the deck. Like, if you go second and your opponent gets a Dark Power Black Mass Saiyan down turn 1, you might just lose because you can't answer it, or your game is going to get pushed way, 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 way into the late game, much later than you want it to. So Crisis Crusher is hugely important for the deck. So he's been the newest addition. If it turns out that people aren't mainboarding Black Mass Saiyan, then Crisis Crusher isn't needed, and you can go back to Hachiyak Hatred Everlasting. But I suspect that this deck will force Black Mass Saiyan into the main boards of some decks. So at the moment, my choice for this slot is the Crisis Crusher. And then finally, the super combo, Bibbidi Primeval Conjurer. This card is nuts in the deck. Most of the times when you're going to be comboing it, it's going to be at least 30k, so you have more than one in hand. You pretty much guaranteed damage. It's kind of nuts. You do have to be careful about when and how you use it, because if the game's gone a bit later, you have to use it before you deck out, because if your drop area shuffles back into your deck, you've lost so much power off of that Bibbidi, so it's very important. to make sure you know when you're using that ability and timing everything right. And finally, here's the deck list. It's pretty much all 4 ofs. It is an aggro deck, so this is hugely important for consistency. It's a 52 card deck, not 50. The reason for this being is I was running 50 cards before I ran Isekai, and then I needed to add it in, or I wanted to add it in because that card's just very good. And I had nothing else I really wanted to take out, so I left it at 52. I run, as far as like the 3 ofs go, Viara, Everlasting Assault. It's not going to come up as often as it did with Boo because your hand isn't as consistent as Boo's was. So Viara might not come up as much. Like if you mill through your tag team Gohans, or like you can't loop, you can't like continue to do shenanigans with Viara and Gohan, it's just not going to come up as often as it did in Boo. And then 3 Great Ape Son Goku Saiyan Instincts. You're really wanting to end the game on turn 2. This doesn't even need to come up in games. It's just for when you get stalled out. 3 is a fine number. You're seeing so much of your deck. You're milling so many cards that 3 is a fine number. I was originally running it at 4, but I believed Crisis Crusher should be a 4 of over Saiyan Instincts solely because of how bad Black Mass Saiyan is for the deck. And then 2 Hidden Power Supreme Kai. Ideally, I would like this at 3 because if you see it, you feel much safer because you feel like you can definitely win. But you don't want to brick with it and your unison card. It's not a good feeling. So 2 is fine. Like if you don't see it, it's not the end of the world. If you see it, you will probably win. And then I guess we just talk about some of the counters to the deck because outside of Black Mass Saiyan, obviously people are going to mention that this deck loses to this and this, and I would argue that it doesn't lose to these cards that I'm showing here. Dormant Potential Unleashed is the strongest counter to the deck. It pretty much just says no. It only allows me to get 2 more attacks in. So depending on what those 2 attacks are, it has pretty much just stalled my turn. And there is no real answer to it, so Dormant Potential Unleashed is a very strong card. Topo Righteous Aid is the next card, which is very good. You can play through a Topo depending on when Topo has been played, but this is unlikely. So the most important thing for those that are going to be playing Vegenks, and for those that are going to be, just for everyone really, once game 2 and 3 happens, you side into Koitsukai for the Topo matchup, because you Koitsukai, and then if they decide to Topo, they lose 4 cards from hand, and you can just pass pretty safely knowing that they're considerably down in hand, and it puts them really far back. So Koitsukai is a super solid answer to Topo. And then finally, Nimbus. This is the one everyone talks about. I don't know why, because Nimbus is like the weakest card against this deck. Turn 1 Nimbus is very good. Turn 2 Nimbus is fine as well, depending if it's at the very beginning of the turn. But you can play through a Nimbus. You can push 5 damage through a Nimbus. So you have your leader swing. If you have a Kai, you can tack on a double strike onto the Kai, onto the leader. You have a double strike Go Tank swing, and then you have Black Mass Saiyan Splintering Mind to burn and then push for that extra life as well. So you can push 5 to 6 damage through a Nimbus. So while Nimbus is a good card and it will slow the deck down, it's definitely one of the weaker counters to the deck. So yeah, we're gonna have some gameplay up on the channel of me playing the deck against Josh and Droid and a couple other decks. Josh is mainly on Jank, so just take what you will of those matchups. But test the deck, test against the deck, try it out, see what you think, and then yeah, let us know in the comments, and I'll see you on the next one. We'll be right back.